Hello. In this video, we hope to provide a straightforward tutorial for teachers, especially middle and high school teachers in general education settings, who are interested in creating a physical classroom setting that's accessible, comfortable, and welcoming for students with autism and ADHD. Many people go undiagnosed with ADHD and/or autism in childhood, especially students who are assigned female at birth, students of color, and gifted students. There will likely be students in your gen ed classroom who meet the diagnostic criteria but have not yet been given an official diagnosis. Undiagnosed students are often misinterpreted as shy, sensitive, lazy, disrespectful, uninterested, talented but needing to apply themselves, and so forth, when in reality they're trying very hard and are simply lacking the resources, acceptance, support, and encouragement they need to thrive.
This support begins with the physical setup of your classroom. In this video, we'll start by touching on the basics of what autism and ADHD are, as well as a few characteristics of autism and ADHD that tend to be particularly relevant for middle and high school students and their teachers. Then we'll dive into several ways you can make your classroom a better physical space for students with autism and ADHD to learn and thrive, including classroom light and sound design, setting options, and STEM toys, plus a few miscellaneous suggestions.
So what exactly are autism and ADHD? This is a complex and controversial question that we won't explore in much depth here, but to offer a basic explanation, ADHD and autism are neurodevelopmental conditions, meaning they're lifelong conditions caused by your brain developing differently than is considered typical, and they can impact almost every aspect of your day-to-day life. People with ADHD tend to experience boredom more intensely than people without ADHD, leading us to struggle with routine tasks and thrive with exciting ones. And autistic people tend to interpret sensory information and social cues differently than people who aren't autistic, leading us to seek out particular sensory and social environments while avoiding other environments. These differences in brain development aren't inherently bad. In fact, many experts suggest that humans actually benefit from having this neurological diversity within our species. When this diversity isn't understood or accepted by society, however, people who don't experience things in neurotypical ways become systematically marginalized, as mainstream society doesn't take into account our unique perspectives, experiences, and strengths. As for what exactly these unique perspectives entail, autism and ADHD encompass far more characteristics than we could possibly touch on in this video. But here are a few characteristics that are often particularly noticeable in classroom settings, from both a neurotypical and neurodiverse perspective.
Forgetfulness.
Keeping track of assignments and deadlines is much easier with clear structure.
Poor time management.
Time tends to fly by much faster than expected when we're engaged with something.
Poor planning, laziness.
We tend to try tackling things all at once. We have to be genuinely passionate about tasks, or the boredom can be too overwhelming to complete said tasks.
Distractibility.
We need to seek out the right amount and types of sensory and mental stimulation in order to focus.
Ignoring verbal instructions.
Focusing on and understanding verbal speech is much easier with subtitles or other written material.
Awkwardness, shyness, interrupting, being disrespectful, ignoring subtle requests to alter behavior, being overly sensitive to light or joking criticism.
It's difficult to gauge when it's our turn to talk, whether other people are serious or joking, how much eye contact to make, and so forth. We prefer when people are honest and straightforward about what they mean and how they like to communicate.
Upset by changes in routine.
We enjoy doing things in familiar ways.
Being over or undersensitive to sensory stimuli, light, sound, pain, etc.
Maybe low lighting is more comfortable, or pain isn't that bothersome, or sitting still is uncomfortable, or moving around feels good, etc.
These experiences of sensory input are the reason for our first two suggestions for neurodiverse-friendly classroom setups, sound-absorbing walls and halogen lights. Of our suggestions, these two are likely the most difficult modifications for most teachers to make, especially teachers operating on a particularly limited funding, but we urge you to consider talking with your school administration, investing in DIY soundproofing, and so forth, as these modifications can be extremely helpful for your students.
Several studies exploring the impact of lighting type and soundproofing on student learning have found that autistic teens are often more engaged in class, perform better on assessments, and report feeling better emotionally in classes with sound-absorbing walls and halogen lighting compared to fluorescent lights. Sound-absorbing walls, from professionally installed soundproofing to simply hanging up more curtains, reduce the amount of echoing conversation and background noises, such as the scratching of pencils or whir of a projector, that can be distracting and stressful to students who are especially sensitive to sound. Similarly, some studies have suggested that autistic people who are particularly sensitive to light can actually see the flickering of properly functioning fluorescent lights, which isn't supposed to be noticeable. This flickering can cause eye strain, headaches, and the feeling that the room is pulsing, all of which can generate stress and anxiety and cause harm to students' overall health. Halogen lights, meanwhile, produce a softer and more consistent light that avoids these issues. Obviously, completely replacing your classroom's overhead lights may be a project largely outside your control, but you can also consider obtaining halogen lamps for your classroom or relying more on sunlight from available windows. Even small changes can make a positive difference.
Next, we're going to discuss how seating options can be designed to better support your ADHD and autistic students. What works best is going to vary from student to student and class to class, so it's always a very good idea to talk with your students and learn about what they personally find most helpful. That said, here are some general suggestions for seating options that may help students with ADHD and autism feel comfortable and engaged in classroom settings.
Seating neurodivergent students away from doors and windows can help reduce distractions from outside the classroom. For group work, we often do well when paired with another student, especially one who is understanding and likely to stay on task. Having a partner to work with means that we can help each other focus and form meaningful social connections, as opposed to potentially isolating or distracting solo desks, or potentially overwhelming large groups. Being seated near the front of the class can also make it easier to focus on the teacher. Teachers should give us regular breaks from sitting, and many of us may benefit from alternative seating, like rolling chairs, swiveling chairs, bean bags, yoga balls, sitting backwards on chairs, sitting on the floor, or standing. These seating options can allow for more movement than the typical student desk, providing helpful sensory input for autistic students and students with ADHD. Neurodivergent students can also benefit from other opportunities to be physically active in the classroom, such as writing on the whiteboard. Additionally, many autistic students are happiest with a familiar and comfortable routine. If you regularly change your seating arrangements, giving students the option to stay at the same desk might be helpful.
Our next suggestion for teachers aiming to create accessible and enjoyable classrooms for ADHD and autistic students, providing STEM toys. The word stimming, derived from the term self-stimulatory behavior, refers to any repetitive action that helps you regulate your emotions and sensory input, from clicking a pen when you're typing to focus, jumping up and down when you're excited, or biting your nails when you're anxious. Everyone stims all the time, but stimming is especially important for autistic people and people with ADHD because navigating a world designed for only neurotypical perspectives is often an overwhelming sensory and social experience, and stimming is a particularly effective way to manage that stress. STEM toys, also known as fidget toys, provide a safe and healthy outlet for stimming, instead of more harmful alternatives like picking at one's hair or skin that students might turn to when bored or overwhelmed. Teachers are sometimes hesitant to allow or provide fidget toys in their classrooms due to concerns that they'll be distracting, break easily, or cost too much money, but students with ADHD and autism will actually find it much easier to focus given the opportunity to STEM, and there are a wide variety of cheap, quiet, and durable STEM toys available. In addition to store-bought, you can also make your own STEM toys. Anything that's small, simple, and fun to absent-mindedly fidget with will likely be a much appreciated addition to your classroom environment.
These suggestions are only a few of many possible ways to make your classroom a better learning environment for students with ADHD and autism. Other such opportunities include providing weighted lap desks, which provide a gentle pressure that many neurodivergent people find deeply calming, and noise-canceling headphones, which are especially useful for students who are overwhelmed or distracted by classroom noises. It can also be helpful for students to have somewhere outside of the classroom to go if they're feeling overstimulated or overwhelmed, where they can take a break and work out their emotions before re-engaging with the class experience. We also strongly encourage teachers to seek out other educational resources created by neurodivergent people, and again, to talk with your students about what works best for them personally. Whether or not you ever become aware of any official diagnoses in your classroom, odds are very high that you have autistic students and students with ADHD in your class right now, and these students can and will learn and thrive if given the opportunity. And this opportunity begins with creating a physical classroom where all students feel comfortable, engaged, and welcome. Thank you for listening.